there's a lot of people that are nodding with you because we can deflate our way out of some of this debt. But the difference between 2% and 3% compounded for the dollar is devastating. And I don't know, for you to just blow it off is a little weird. I mean, there's a reason they want 2%. Anyone can move goalposts. I mean, if you compound 3%, that's 50% higher than 2%.
Do you know where 2% comes from?
No, but
2%
3%, it would be... would make all of us feel awful in 10 years.
2% comes from the Bank of New Zealand in the early 90s.
It seems like a good number to me.
But it's an arbitrary number. What you've got to take into...
5 is an arbitrary number. If you want to deflate 36 trillion, let's go to 10 then.
I don't want to pull the rug from under U.S. economic exceptionalism. I think we are outpacing the rest of the world.
We're starting to at 3%.
I think we are investing in the economies of tomorrow, in the growth drivers of tomorrow.
Government?
No, the private sector, everything else. If you push this economy into recession...
The private sector is not what causes the inflation.
Joe, if you push this economy into recession, you will not just lose current standard of living, you will lose future standard of living. We are in a very good position.
3% loses the future standard of living. That's the problem.
2.5 to 3 is what I said. You went immediately to 3.
Well, if you say 3 at the high end,
and as long as inflation,
okay with it.
As long as inflation expectations are stable, you can navigate.
You better buy some Bitcoin, Mohammed.
Obviously, my heart is with Joe, right? Like, you don't want to have 3% be the inflation target. It's a drag. I mean, right? Like, we're here with Bitcoin because we think that, inflation is fundamentally a drag on people and systems. The fiat system at this stage has to make decisions given the weight of what it's already under, right? And if the Fed would have to raise rates to 6% to hit that 2% inflation target, it's just interesting because you do that, you do crash things. He's not wrong per se. We're in this runaway train. And if you stop debasing it, the whole thing crashes and burns, right? So I don't want to brush his point off too much because it's real. What you need though is you need something deeper. You need a more systems level change. It's not about, can we use fiat levers to get the inflation rate down to 2%? We need something else.
Yeah, the idea of a target started in New Zealand, 1989. The managers of the governors of the Federal Reserve, the Reserve Bank in New Zealand went out to dinner. They're like, hey, we should have a target so we can tell the people what we're working toward and kind of evaluate our work, right? And so they set it at 2%. I think it wasn't completely arbitrary. I think it was set low enough so that there wouldn't be inflation felt immediately. It would be gradually over time. In fact, a 2% inflation rate takes about 35 years for your money to value to cut in half, right? So that's about the extent of one human's career time, maybe 40, 45 years, something like that, or 2 generations of people. So it's kind of slow as we experience time, okay? And if you go to 3%, it comes all the way down to 23 and a half years. You're going to start feeling that much faster. 4%, I didn't calculate, but is going to be in the teens. Yeah. So these are not arbitrary numbers. They're you could have set it at 10%. That would be arbitrary and probably way too high. So 2% was the target rate. This is Keynesian economics. It's okay, we're going to live with inflation and debt-based money, and that's the goal here. It's not to let it run away from us. We're going to target 2%. The United States didn't actually have a 2% target until 2012. Ben Bernanke implemented the 2% target officially, the Federal Reserve. So this is a very new thing. It's only 12 years old at this point for the United States to have this target. Something that's interesting to me is once you set that target, it's difficult to move the goalposts, difficult to switch the target, because then you're like, okay, well, you guys didn't know what you were doing then, and you aren't able to do your job. Your job is to keep it at 2%. So that's probably why there wasn't a target until 2012. I think the target was set in 2012 to provide some confidence to the markets, and this is our long-term target, and here's some stability in what you can expect from Fed rate policy. So I think the intention there was good. But just 12 years later, starting to trial balloon the idea of Let's go to 2.5%, 3%. If you watch the full clip, which is on YouTube, and I'll put it in the show notes, Elarian is saying effectively, look, we're at where we are now, and it's not bad. Economy's pretty good. So it seems that 2% may have been too low. Maybe we can go higher, right? So this is this like creep, this Keynesian inevitable creep of inflation rates going higher and higher, and then eventually hyperinflating. That's one of the most common ways that a fiat money will just go out of existence. So that's what I'm reading into this. And what Joe is saying is like, look, if you can't pick a number, if you can't keep it there, then what's going to happen? You're going to see the value of people's hard-earned money cut in half faster and faster and faster and faster. And that's what we're looking at happening here. And what happens when you have the 1% able to access that money at lower interest rates, right? And the value of the money is debasing all the time and faster, you just get an increasing wealth inequality, which we've seen since 1970. If you look at the charts, there are other reasons for wealth inequality, but the kind of bottom line driver, in my opinion, is inflation and money printing, money debasing. So you end up with a small amount of people with massive amounts of money and a massive amount of people with small amounts of money. And we don't want to live in that world, right? By contrast, with Bitcoin, you could support a deflationary economy. And deflationary economies have been demonized, or deflation has been demonized since the Great Depression, maybe even before that, because it causes all kinds of problems for people trying to make money, for people trying to service debt, it exacerbates wealth inequality as well, and all of these things. But that is in a fiat world. Deflation in a fiat world is trouble. It's hard. It causes lots of problems for people. Deflation in a world where you have a fixed monetary policy is actually great. It helps my money increases in value over time. I'm, incentivized to make equity investments, to think long term. If you have a world where everybody has a money that allows them to invest in equity, it's kind of equity itself, right? But you can also then use it to invest in a business or a friend's business or whatever. We can all have equity, or in stocks and real estate and all of that stuff. We'll all have more money to invest in these things that only the rich right now, the fiat rich, have access to. And that's how they store their wealth. And we're all left to have our, value of our money cut in half faster and faster.
Yeah, technology in general creates leverage. Leverage creates unequal outcomes. So since the beginning of the time, if you're more intelligent or you have more resources or you have more luck, you're going to create more, way more. And then you add the stronger the technology, the longer the lever, so the more unequal the outcomes. That is the state of the world. What do we do about that? Well, we can have increasing wealth concentration, or naturally what would occur is that the prices of goods come down because we get more efficient and better at making things. And that's effectively a way to socialize the gains of mass technological improvements, so the whole world benefits from it. That's not happening in a fiat world, though, because the prices are going up and your savings getting debased. So we're really not allowing the average person to benefit from any technological wins. Now, if we switch to a Bitcoin system in that world, obviously there's no from one to the other. So skip the transition part. But for thought experiment wise, in a Bitcoin system, savings goes up, prices go down, some combination of those two. Then all of a sudden you can have sustainable technological growth, and you don't have people unable to buy eggs and burning down the cities. We want unequal outcomes. We want maximum leverage, maximum technology. On the back end of that, we need to raise the whatever we consider the bottom socioeconomic status that we're comfortable with, which is lower prices and better savings.
I think the detail there is that the natural gains produced by real world economic growth and technology have been financially arbitraged away by money printing. That's the real key. Is there's some, let's say the real world gets 3% better, 4% better, 5% better every year. Absent any money printing, people would see prices and things in their environment would get that benefit. You get 3 to 5% benefit each year. But instead, what you can do in this fiat system, when you see kind of real world growth happening, you can essentially print more money into that growth and eat away at that gain. Eat away because you're redirecting that net productivity gain to political outcomes and
Correct.
to the goals and projects that whoever is directing that flow of money is pointing it towards. And that's the real misaligned incentive. I agree with Brandon, that like unequal outcomes have been with us for all of human history. I'm never going to be as good as I'm not going to be as good of a basketball player as LeBron James. I'm not going to be as good a physicist as Albert Einstein. We don't live in an equal world, but there is an added over the top systemic component here where you're actually taking a natural accruing benefit away from other people.
Yeah, it just redistributes some economic power. And yes, we're going to have a merit-based economy, and we're going to accrue wealth based on merit. That's fine. But in a fiat world, that all of that value gets to be retained, while the rest of us who are, storing most of our value in fiat, or maybe have a house that we've paid a mortgage on for 30 years, and like that's our retirement or something like that, right? Or 401k. These guys have so much economic power. Bitcoin will kind of, or a deflationary economy will kind of redistribute that power in a more fair way. I'm not saying it's going to be like socialist, right? It's still a merit-based economy, but it allows people to take some control over their lives and not continuing to be on the treadmill constantly trying to keep up.
What's interesting here, Brady, is it's actually a perversion of capitalism, because like one of the like essential components of capitalism is generally speaking, it's a win-win system. If you invent a technology or process that's really, really good, then it makes the whole of human society landscape better, and you get rich. You get rich from the contribution to the techno landscape, right? We can align incentives where your desire to get rich is effectively yoked to your ability to produce value for the market, which improves everybody's quality of life. But if that kind of net benefit gets eaten away at, you've actually perverted capitalism.
Yes.
Here. You've made capitalism not what it's supposed to be.
It's socialism for the rich. Go ahead, Brandon.
Exactly. And to make it super real, young people today are flirting with communism, calling each other comrade, hammer and sickle, like genuinely questioning whatever we call this Western liberal thing.
They're looking for a solution. That's not the solution.
Correct.
But you can't blame them for wanting to try something else.
Exactly. However, if the benefits of technology were falling down to the population, which is the natural state, then the incentive to throw away the system or feel nihilistic would go away, or at least be reduced, because their quality of life would be improving at the rate that it should.
Right.
Look at your house. Like now, like take a mental picture of your house, the inside of your house, and now compare it to the inside of your house in the year 2000. It's not that different. Like the screens are thinner. You have a phone, like everything got thinner, everything got more efficient, but you had a computer, you had a fridge, you had internet, you had phone, you had all these things. It's roughly the same. Look at the inside of someone's house from the year 1910 to the year 1940, or the year 1930 to the year 1960, or something like that. And you find this like much more rapid pace of economic growth. The very foundational fabric of people's lives changed rapidly. You suddenly have a fridge, you suddenly have air conditioning, you suddenly have, everyone can afford a car, everyone can this was this very tangible rate of growth that we did at one time experience. And there's this really interesting way that it got really minimized from, basically there was computers in the 90s, and then it's just been a refinement process, but few 0 to 1 breakthroughs. And that's a larger topic. And I'm not attributing that to fiat per se. Obviously there's a role, but people do not wake up on a decade by decade timeline and be like, wow, generally speaking, in aggregate, my life has gotten so much better in a material component.
Yep, absolutely. People get crushed by debt. In a Bitcoin-based economy where you have an equity-based money, then everybody has equity to play with and invest and hope for the future and something to build. And with debt, we're just constantly paying interest to middlemen and banks, and we have to fight against that all the time and try to get some kind of profit above and beyond all of that interest and debt that we owe. So it's just a completely different societies with a gold standard were probably more productive in this regard, like Steven said. Brandon, any last words?
We have a lot of zombie corporations today, meaning that they do not keep up with the hurdle rate. They are destroying shareholder value every year, but they can play fiat debt games to borrow money at essentially zero and play funny games to keep their share price afloat, right? Which is wasted capital, entirely wasted. We have people working on things they shouldn't. We have machines building things they shouldn't, et cetera. And so if we all of a sudden forced all those corporations to realize their losses, a ton of them would go out of business. We'd recycle all the capital. So that's a preamble to say, is that the symptom of the debt-based system going too far to where we just have fewer people actually trying to build something new and taking risk? In which case, if fewer risk takers are out there, then we have fewer 0 to 1 moments, like you mentioned in the Peter Thiel thesis.
I think that's right. And I mean, I think that's always been the beauty of America is we really reward the founder, the risk taker. We reward the person that tries and does this new thing. And that's kind of what's so dangerous about all these government policies that try to take away the reward from people who have done the deed, right? Like you need to incentivize those people. And it is net beneficial for everyone else in the society that those people exist and succeed. As long as those benefits from other people's risk taking don't get siphoned away.